Hi, my name is Susan Spierre and I'm a research assistant and PhD student in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University. Along with my advisors, I have helped to design and test the Externalities game, in which you'll be participating over the next week and a half or so. The game was originally designed to let students, like yourselves, experience firsthand the ethical implications of negative externality problems. In this presentation, I will give you some general information about the game and how it is played.
In the Externalities game, each player represents a manufacturer of goods. The more goods the player manufactures, the more profit they make in the form of grade points for themselves. However, production does more than create profits, it also creates pollution, which is subtracted from the grade of everyone in the class. In this way, TEG models the classic interaction between producing parties, such as a coal factory, and damaged parties, such as a kid that develops asthma from the pollution produced by the factory. The result predicted by non-cooperative game theory is that all players will overproduce, resulting in tragic overpollution that ruins everyone's grade. However, Ronald Coase predicts that something different will happen. He says that so long as property rights are well defined and transaction costs are low, then players should be able to negotiate with one another to achieve an optimal level of production. For example, the factory might offer to pay the family whose kid developed asthma to try and make up for the damage their pollution has caused. However, in reality, problems of negative externalities rarely have well-defined property rights and minimal transaction costs. In this example, the family would have difficulty proving that the asthma was a direct result of the factory's pollution. Also, there seems to be something immoral about a factory's ability to simply pay families for these types of damages to society. Coase remains silent on how these moral implications can be reconciled. The Externalities game allows us to test the Coase theorem to see if this seemingly unlikely outcome can be realized in our classroom. A much more complex example of a negative externality that has strong moral considerations is climate change. The reason for this complexity is that emissions of greenhouse gases from any location on the Earth will play a role in affecting climate globally. So the impact of any particular greenhouse gas emission is not realized solely at its source, but are dispersed to other regions of the Earth as well. This figure from Sampson et al. 2011 shows the moral dimensions of the climate change problem. The top map shows the countries who are contributing the most to the problem in terms of per capita emissions of carbon dioxide, shown in red. Those countries emitting the least are shown in blue. On the bottom map, however, shows the countries that will be most impacted and are most vulnerable to climate change in red, and the least vulnerable shown in blue. You can see a clear mismatch between those who are causing the problem and benefiting from emissions in the top map, and those who are suffering the consequences shown on the bottom. Coase might say that the problem can be fixed by transferring funds from the industrialized countries to the developing countries of the world, and indeed, this is the basis for many climate policy proposals. However, if the rich can simply pay to pollute, it weakens the stigma attached to harming the environment. The point is that if we motivate mitigation of climate change through economically driven mechanisms alone, as Coase might suggest, it can undermine the sense of shared sacrifice necessary to future global cooperations on the environment. Because market-based solutions to externality problems fail to address the moral implications of the problem, causes these solutions to be less than ideal. This may be why past international efforts to mitigate climate change with market mechanisms have failed to commit all parties to action. So the Externalities game will offer you, your classmates, as well as students at another university, a chance to test Coase's theory that parties can negotiate an optimal allocation of resources at the international level. In the game, you are likely to experience ethical tensions that make the negotiation process not quite as simple as Coase would indicate. The goal is for you to get first-hand experience at Coasean bargaining, but also to get experience with the ethical tensions characteristic of externality problems like climate change. So the question is, will you be successful at negotiating a strategy for the game with other students who may have different preferences than you? In the Externalities game, you and your classmates will confront a non-cooperative game theory problem. Non-cooperative game theory problems are characterized by conflicting tensions between personal interests and what is best for the entire group. You will be deciding how to allocate a limited number of grade points with your classmates and students at another university. You may choose to produce as many points as you can to earn yourself a good grade, but you will only be able to do so at the expense of the grades of other students. Thus, your decisions will directly affect the grades of every other student playing the game. If you haven't been already, you will be randomly assigned one of 3 producer roles, either luxury, intermediate, or subsistence. Each role produces individual grade points and externality points differently according to the descriptions here. Luxury players gain the most points per unit of production, but also emit the greatest amount of externalities. If you're a luxury player, you can produce between 0 and 10 production units. Intermediate players gain the second most points per unit of production and emit the second highest amount of externalities. If you're an intermediate player, you can produce between 0 and 50 production units. Finally, subsistence players gain the least amount of points per unit of production, but emit the least amount of externalities. If you're a subsistence player, you can produce anywhere from 0 to 240 production units. In the figure to the right, you can see how your individual grade will be determined. For each player, the individual production points accumulate at a diminishing rate, shown by the top function on the graph. On the other hand, the shared externality points generated by the entire group increase exponentially, shown by the bottom function on the graph. Your grade will be calculated by subtracting your share of social costs or externalities generated by everyone from your total production points earned individually. So your grade is the difference between the two curves. You'll have time to negotiate contracts with other players about production before submitting your final decisions online. All players will receive a grade for their production soon after all decisions are submitted. This will be your initial grade. Then a second period of negotiation begins where players can settle contracts regarding a transfer of points between players. Contract settlement decisions will also be submitted online. All of the contract settlement decisions will be added and subtracted from the initial grades, and each player will receive a final grade for gameplay. The complete game module that you will be participating in has many components, including pregame and postgame activities. Before the game, you will first be assigned a unique player role. Second, you will be asked to take a short pregame survey available online. Also, your instructor will review an information letter that will explain how we will be conducting research in this experience. With these logistical items out of the way, we will begin the game module. We've modeled the game to align with the Kolb learning cycle to allow students to participate in 4 different learning approaches, including abstract conceptualization, active experimentation, concrete experience, and reflective observation. Specifically, if you haven't already, you will be assigned to read a blog that introduces you to the concepts of negative externalities, the Coase theorem, and the moral implications of these issues. This activity allows you to conceptualize the key issues you will confront in the game experience. Then, you will be introduced to the TEG spreadsheet, which you are able to download and experiment with before gameplay. In the next step, you will be engaging with other students during gameplay. This is when you'll gain experience negotiating and strategizing with other students and making decisions that impact others. After the game is complete, your class will participate in a reflective discussion, and some students will be assigned a personal reflective essay or online post. Your instructor will provide you with specific instructions on the assignment for your class. Finally, you will complete the post-game survey. All of these post-game activities are designed for you to reflect on the game experience. This concludes the general introduction to the Externalities game. Thanks for listening, and good luck.